Thank you for inviting me here. Thank you for making me president. As I've said before, George has done a terrific job in the last year. It's going to be a very hard act to follow, but I shall do what I can.
You'll be fine.
Thank you, George. And George has very graciously offered his assistance through the next coming months.
Absolutely.
So, honoured guests, ladies and gentlemen, we live in a rapidly changing world. The climate is changing. People are living longer. The world population is increasing. Resources are coming under ever-increasing pressure. Power prices are rising, and the world is shrinking. There has never been a better time to be a building services engineer. Let's start with that shrinking world. I stand before you this evening as the first international president of this institution. However, this fact should not come as such a surprise. 10 years ago, we had banners made for an exhibition in Melbourne proclaiming 17,000 members across 40 countries. We now have over 21,400 members spread over 98 countries. Almost 30% of our membership lives and works outside of the UK. From an Australian perspective, CIBSE has come a long way in the 27 years since Australia became a region, and remains very committed to continuing to improve the depth and the relevance to its international membership. Today, I would like to share with you my views on the challenging, exciting and the vital role that our profession and our institution should play in this changing world. With the environmental uncertainties, the threats from climate change, the constraints presented by economic priorities and socio-political inertia, we need to be at the very top of our game if we are to make big improvements in both the design and the performance of the operating life of the built environment. We must be grounded in reality when we're proposing new solutions, avoiding greenwash, while taking a genuine whole-of-life approach to both the new and the existing building stock. We need to maintain and develop the professional knowledge which CIBSE provides and enable the global CIBSE family to both use and to contribute to that knowledge. Sustainability is an issue that I'm sure is front and centre amongst most of you here tonight. And this knows no natural borders, recognises no lines drawn on a map. The initiatives that we can take on it in one area, one location, can be transferred elsewhere. Closely related to this issue, and also borderless, is energy. And if we take a look at the big picture of future energy supplies, we're confronted by multiple challenges. On the demand side, we have explosive world population growth, coupled with a rapidly growing middle class in developing nations. All of these rightly striving for a higher standard of living and driving an enormous growth in energy consumption. On the supply side, we appear to be facing a rapid decline in the production of oil and in the foreseeable future, gas. Coal is still in abundance, but it does come with significant environmental consequences. The nuclear option is always there, but the accompanying health and safety issues and the waste disposal issues make it a very difficult option to implement. Besides these considerable obstacles, it also has the weight of public opinion against it, fearful of both the potential immediate effect of a system failure and the insidious nature of the resulting after effects. Renewables currently only play a minor role in the provision of energy. However, this is growing, and I feel they should be encouraged. These factors make decisions affecting the future supply of energy very interesting and critical. Energy has been a key issue in recent elections in my own country, in Germany, and as well as being the subject of political debate here in the UK. What that very brief snapshot of energy supply tells us is that it will require acute and even visionary management, both to encourage energy efficiency and to fully commercialise effective alternate sources of power, not only just to meet the future demands, but also to control and reduce carbon emissions that threaten our very future. I don't pretend to have all the answers, What I do know is that it will require a partnership between government, the community, and relevant professionals such as us the world over. Of course, closest to our hearts and of immediate relevance to us is the fact that buildings and their services play a very large part in a nation's energy consumption and, of course, the resulting carbon emissions. Buildings are responsible for approximately 40 to 45% of aggregate energy demand. Delivering significant cuts in this demand and balancing the economic and the environmental imperatives will require very careful management. This may seem out of the realm of our control, but we all have a voice, and if enough people shout, others will listen. Our institution has the knowledge to deliver significant improvements in energy efficiency without compromising on building performance. The urgency of acting on this now is that damage that we are doing to the environment now is going to take many years to mitigate. The recent report from the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change underlines the degree of scientific consensus about the scale and the urgency of the task we face. Finally, sustainability has a social dimension. To address these issues effectively, we must attract a wider and a more diverse range of people into our global, professional and institutional family, and to continue to support our younger engineers as they develop into the next generation of CIBSE leaders. So what should our role as engineers be in this changing landscape? In my opinion, part of our role is that while we push ahead with improving internal comfort and energy efficiency, embracing alternative and new technologies, and encouraging governments and the public to do more, we have a duty to keep our feet grounded in reality. Industry relies on engineers to provide a true and fair view of all aspects of engineering, so we need to maintain that balanced view, cutting through the hype that accompanies many products and systems and evaluating their real worth, and even more importantly, where they are appropriate and where they are not appropriate. I've seen many products claiming huge benefits to energy efficiency or to the environment, but when you look at them in more detail, they're very questionable, they can deliver very little, and sometimes those products can do more harm than good. Some of these are incredible, such as using a fan to drive a wind turbine to give back free energy. That's amazing, but the amazing part of it is that that has got through the drawing board stages into production and into marketing. I was at a large HVAC exhibition recently and was surprised at how many of the products around the exhibition featured the special labels marked as green product. One such item was a water pump, so it's hard to see where the actual benefits were of that, so I was looking quite closely to see if I could pick something out on it. The truth was that someone had walked around the exhibition stands with a wad of labels asking who would like one. So why did this pump have a label? Well, it was very apparent after it was explained. It was because the pump was painted a Kermit Frog shade of green. There are, of course, many great examples of true innovation that are underpinning the drive to greater sustainability, and I'm sure that you can all think of examples in your local cities. Some of these also have features that do not necessarily make economic or practical sense. I've been forgetting the slides. There we go. I'll try and catch up. Apologies for that. We have a landmark building in Melbourne. It's known as Council House 2, or more locally as CH2. It was built about 8 years ago, and it featured in the CIBSE Journal. The project incorporated many tried and tested initiatives, such as special provision for natural daylighting, the incorporation of a usable thermal mass, a high-performance facade, and the provision of shading. It also included other less tried and tested features, such as shower towers, black water recovery, use of phase change materials, microgeneration with an absorption chiller, and wind turbines. The project was used primarily as a demonstration of all things possible rather than practical, and I'm more than happy with that philosophy. In fact, I applaud those amongst us who are able and willing to experiment and to push the boundaries. Unfortunately, and as expected by some, despite having a lot of the smarts, the results of the performance monitoring have shown that the building has not lived up to its lofty aspirations. The building owners have always been open about the building's successes and the failures, and they are planning control changes and upgrades to improve its performance. It is critical that our profession ensures that the promised benefits of measures that we incorporate into a building's performance are delivered upon. If for some reason they're not, then we must investigate the reasons why not. And then we must share the lessons learned so as to improve our collective knowledge. We have an obligation to ensure continual improvement and to minimize the repetition of the same mistakes. I believe that everyone here in this room tonight is committed to providing a better built environment. Whether we're building services engineers or if we have another role, most of us directly influence the planning, design, construction, commissioning, or the operational management of our buildings. For those of us that are involved in the design or construction, we should be aware that most commercial buildings have an expected life of over 50 years. And a large part of the inefficiencies that are built into a building's design today will stay with the building for the rest of its life. I'm sure that none of us here intentionally would wish to hand down an unnecessary legacy of poor performance to the next couple of generations. So how can we ensure that buildings continue to improve, and how can we accelerate the performance improvements? I believe that this requires a mix of mandatory and voluntary measures. Measures that address the differences between the public and the private sectors, and given the difficulties of providing motivation and rewards to both landlords and tenants, the unique challenge of multi-tenanted building stock. Governments, besides directly and indirectly owning and occupying a large number of buildings, control the codes and regulations in our industry. Therefore, they naturally have a big part to play in actively planning for the future, or in cooperation with industry and professional institutions. While recognizing the economic reality under which building owners and developers operate, and the expected lifespan of a building, there needs to be mandatory and economically justified minimum standards which are subject to a periodic review. Through this regulatory control, governments obviously have the power to mandate for more efficient buildings. It is imperative in doing so that these measures are clear, unambiguous, and enforceable. They should not be left open for the intentional or unintentional misinterpretation. Again, this will be a balance between the upfront cost of construction and the cost of operating and maintaining that building. As new technology improves energy efficiency while decreasing in capital cost and energy prices continue to rise, the economic balance point changes, making more measures viable. And from that outlook, it encourages a more regular review period. However, this in turn is another aspect that needs some balance. The market itself needs some confidence that the target is not going to be constantly moving, but subject to a more regular and more planned review. I suggest that today's market that there should currently be every 3 to 5 years. For mandatory efficiency measures to become the norm, they need to be enforced. They need to be checked for compliance. Some countries have several compliance checks, certifying the design, the installation, and then moving forward, reviews of the existing building. Self-certification must be carefully and constantly monitored, otherwise it can blur compliance and dilute the intended outcomes. In terms of voluntary measures affecting building performance in Australia, we have two main sources. We have a suite of rating tools under the Green Building Council's auspices, and a rating tool administered by the New South Wales Government, gauging emissions caused by the use of a building. These alone have inspired a huge change, particularly over the last 10 years, in raising the quality and the energy efficiency of buildings. Perhaps greater than the immediate effect on the actual buildings is that they have also raised the profile of building services to other professions and to the interested public. The Green Building Council's greenstar rating scheme has an extensive range of tools aimed at different segments of the construction market, from educational facilities through to shopping centres, which has predominantly been used for its office design rating tool. This tool is much wider than an energy rating tool and looks holistically at how a building impacts the environment, aiming to make both its construction and its use more sustainable. It has been widely adopted, and few commercial offices are built today without an assessment, either formally or informally, of the star rating. CIBSE'S is the other main rating tool that assesses the greenhouse gas emissions of existing buildings. It can also be used to access water usage and waste. It provides a normalised rating so that similar buildings are able to compare how they are performing against each other. It also provides a means whereby a base rating or a tenancy rating or even a whole building rating can be provided. And this goes some way to mitigating the effects of a bad landlord or a bad tenant negatively skewing the resulting ratings. An official rating can only be achieved when the building has been in use and occupied for a full year and has full disclosure of all energy used in that period. A large part of the existing commercial office market had already voluntarily adopted NABERS before it recently in part became mandatory. The mandatory component of it, which came in a couple of years ago, requires all office buildings over 2,000 square metres to have a NABERS rating as part of their building energy efficiency certificate before they can be offered for sale or for lease. This offers valuable insights for the introduction of minimum energy performance standards into the UK in 2018. In the pursuit of greater levels of energy efficiency and higher ratings, we must never lose sight of the main purpose of having building services in the first place, which of course is to provide the occupants with a healthy and a productive environment. The need to focus on building performance is already recognised by CIBSE in our annual awards, but leadership in building performance will be further highlighted by our City Conference in October. Of course, everyone here tonight appreciates that a high-performance building starts off with its shape, orientation and facade design. Whilst there are some very excellent examples out there, it is disappointing that there are still so many significant buildings being built today with few, if any, passive measures to reduce the heat loads. Managing those loads with energy-using systems will incur a cost, and almost certainly a rising cost, over the whole life of the building. We cannot continue to divorce design and construction from operation. A whole-of-life approach to building performance requires us to consider the ongoing management of the building services. There needs to be a level of synchronicity and coordination between the design, construction and operational phases in a building's lifespan. Design intent needs to address the intended operational requirements to deliver performance over the whole life of the building. There is also a continuing need to nurture that design intent, which can be lost along the way. The change of design teams, which is not that uncommon, means that there is the potential for items to slip through the cracks and for part of the original design intent to be diluted. Design intent can also suffer when the contractor, who has to find money in the project, attempts to find economies along the way. Some of these economies are good, have no effect on the overall outcome, but some can have unintended consequences. Controls are another area where the intended outcomes can go astray, as the interpretation from specification to functional description can leave a lot to be desired. The devil is in the detail. There are so many links between the initial design through to operation, and it only takes miscommunications or a misunderstanding to any of these links to affect the overall outcome. A significant issue can be the complexity of the building services and the controls. These need to be appropriate to the building's intended use and to the people who are likely to operate the building. These factors should primarily determine whether the building should employ a more complex control system that could, in an ideal world, deliver greater comfort and energy savings, or a more robust and a simpler system. The former may be appropriate where there is a long-term client with a strong FM team. If this is not the case, such as when the building is likely to have a substantial turnover of operators, and as the level of complexity increases, so does the probability that things will go wrong, and at worst for energy efficiency measures to work in reverse. In these cases, a simpler and a more robust system needs to be considered at the outset. I've been in the industry long enough to have witnessed a change in the relative influence of architects and builders, and the resulting impact on the quality of some of these buildings. In some cases, and I do stress some cases, value engineering changed in definition from improving the value by finding alternative and better suited solutions to simply reducing the quality and delivering a cheaper and an inferior product. In Australia, the movement of influence from architect to builder has taken a further step, with influence shifting towards the facility management team, especially within PPPs, or as you would know them, PFIs. And that's particularly because many of these such projects have very long operational commitments for periods of 25 to 35 years or even longer than that. As far as the building of substantial infrastructure projects is concerned, I would expect that given enough time, the use of PPP PFIs will continue to rise. The financial aspects of paying for a project over the extended period is an obvious incentive for governments to initiate these projects, as are the emphasis on achieving the functional objectives and the accompanying abatement structures that are put in place. But if PPPs are really to deliver the value over the whole life, we have to get the design, construction, installation and operation better integrated. The earlier PPPs, and I've been involved in a few, the earlier ones were not necessarily very well structured or managed. The result was that a lot of the good intentions of constructing a building built to last, which provided good comfort conditions, a productive environment, be adaptable for future changes, be maintained, serviced and efficiently use energy, were left by the wayside as the design and construction teams either didn't involve the FM team or chose to ignore their advice and went off to build in the same manner that they had done for the last 20 to 25 years. The FM team inherited a building similar to those in the past, and a golden opportunity to do so much better was lost. However, that was early days, and the very fact that there are long operational commitments and a lot of money involved means that the whole of life costs are up for consideration again and are getting much closer scrutiny. Even if there's a piece of equipment that is twice the initial price of an alternative, if it works better, if it lasts longer, if it's more reliable, if it costs less to maintain or uses less energy, then it's up for consideration. As with maintenance issues, correct commissioning is so important. It is at times being neglected. Again, I feel that this is changing, with a growing recognition that a properly commissioned building is much more likely to meet its performance targets in terms of energy and in comfort. This is particularly so, again, in the large PPPs, where clients are acknowledging its importance, and much greater emphasis is being placed on adherence to commissioning codes, commissioning plans, stage signed-off, and witness testing. Contracts appear to be getting more watertight, limiting the ability for contractors at all levels to gain substantial benefits on potential changes or additional works. In the foreseeable future, the largest potential for contractors to make money from their projects will be for them to deliver a quality product, but in a much quicker time frame than has been the norm of the past. The delivery period from initial design concept through to occupation needs to be reduced. The advancement of 3D drawing capability, enabling a much higher level of coordination of the services and structure, is a big enabler to this, as is the resulting progression of off-site manufacturing. Many of the benefits in the adoption of off-site manufacturing are very well known and well understood. There should be substantial improvements in the level of quality between construction work that is done on a site environment to that which is done within a factory environment. There should be an increase in productivity, a reduction in the health and safety issues, a reduction in waste, and of course a much quicker installation period, which enables the expensive construction period of a project to be shortened. This does, however, require some adaptation from the design team of all disciplines to ensure that the design stage is finished earlier. In the UK, the construction strategy anticipates significant reductions in cost, time, resources used, and carbon emissions over the whole of life. It sees the adoption of BIM as being a key to this, and CIBSE is very actively involved, working with other professions to deliver integration and to contribute to achieving the very ambitious goals that are being set by government. We know that a large proportion of the buildings that are here today will be here in 40 years' time. We cannot just wait until they're knocked down to make their replacements better, and so the existing building stock needs to be upgraded. Payback periods on energy efficiency measures are of course longer than on a new build project, but they can still be very clearly justified. Huge improvements can be made to these buildings, and there are many successful examples of refurbishments that have drastically reduced energy, yet at the same time have improved the occupant comfort and productivity. Refurbishing an existing office building can be a very expensive and difficult exercise, and it does take a much higher degree of detailed planning and staging, particularly given that in most cases the building will stay occupied, with services needing to be kept alive, disruptions kept to a minimum. It's easy to say about doing a refurbishment, but it's a lot harder to achieve in practice. It can be likened to changing your underwear without taking your trousers off. Think about it for a minute. You can do it, but it's going to be pretty difficult and it's far less than perfect. However, if we want to make significant reductions in energy use and carbon emissions, we need to address this challenge. If some forethought is used during the original design to provide for future adaptability, subsequent changes of use or refurbishments can be made so much easier, better and quicker. Again, it is critical to ensure that this flexibility is not compromised during the value engineering stages. Building some degree of redundancy, adaptability into a building can pay for itself many times over the very first time that substantial works are carried out. It certainly helps in the planning and decision process of what to replace, repair or redesign if there is a detailed, up-to-date report on the building and its services. The resulting planning can then provide for more effective upgrades as existing equipment reaches the end of its economic life, or when a tenant moves out or the building becomes temporarily vacated. Once again, this underlines the very core of my presentation. The CIBSE members have a key role to play in maximising the long-term performance of our building stock. Essentially, we need to encourage all players in building design, construction and operation to take a whole-of-life approach to ensure that our buildings continue to provide occupants with a healthy and productive environment. Probably the most important role of a modern professional organisation is to maintain an authoritative and up-to-date body of knowledge that supports the work of the whole membership. The CIBSE Knowledge Portal has broken new ground in the deliverance of information containing all published CIBSE guidance and is accessible to all of our members wherever they are in the world. And it's all as a benefit of their membership subscription. Maintaining the relevance of the Knowledge Portal is a vital role that our members can play a large part in. With over 21,400 members in almost 100 countries, our membership already possesses a huge wealth of information, and that's before we start to consider the rest of the people in the industry. How good would it be if we could carry the design engineer through the project from initial design until a couple of years into operation? Yes, there is a cost associated with this, But this needs to be weighed against those projects that have not delivered on their promises and have either suffered poor performance for many years or required substantial costs to put them right. VISRIA's soft landings framework is one of several welcome initiatives in this respect, encouraging meaningful, early and continued contact between the design team, the client and the eventual building operators. Not only does this result in a better building, it creates a forum for the sharing of information that can be used in other projects. In my year as President, I aim to achieve 3 goals and to put the wheels in motion for others. As the first international President of CIBSE, it should come as no surprise to anyone here that I would like to develop CIBSE's influence worldwide. It is so important that CIBSE guidance is relevant not just to the UK, but relevant everywhere. Good engineering principles, they are good here, they are good in Australia and New Zealand, they are good in China, India and the Gulf. They are good the world over. Wider relevance of our knowledge can be a major catalyst in the growth of CIBSE International. As authorities around the world, particularly developing nations, look for appropriate guidance for reference purposes, the more relevant the CIBSE guidance is to their requirements, the more often it will be adopted. The more international membership will join, and then the feedback that we can get from that international membership will ensure that CIBSE guidance continues to spread its relevance elsewhere. We also want to promote a more comprehensive feedback loop. If we are to gain the most out of our buildings, designers need to consult and listen to facility managers, and facility managers need to use the designers. This information is a two-way street. The designers need to know what works and what doesn't work, how the building is actually operated, and the FM people need to understand how the building was planned to work in the first place. The feedback should include relevant information found during the commissioning process, but predominantly a lot of the feedback would come from the facility managers and the occupants. Many people would claim that this is already being done, but realistically I don't feel that this is being done as widely or as deeply as it should be. Facility managers have a huge impact on the efficiency and effectiveness of the building services and their effect on the internal environment. And they possess a wealth of information on all types of buildings and all types of services. This information needs to be captured and turned into knowledge, which can then be shared far more widely to drive improved building performance. Associated to this is a drive to provide in-depth studies of recently completed projects in order to find out, well, what really did work well and what didn't work so well and what should we do next time. This process is vital to shorten the more usual learning cycle and to speed up the spread of information. It is a process that CIBSE seeks to help and promote through the CIBSE Building Performance Awards, in which we seek to recognize and share knowledge about the best performing buildings and the people behind them in the UK and around the world. I have no illusions that this is a simple and straightforward task. Most buildings have got unique aspects that require consideration, so initiatives in one building are not always able to be transferred into another building. There are also the practical aspects of companies being very protective of their very valuable assets, and so being cautious of potentially poor feedback, damaging the value. However, this type of information is very valuable to property companies with a substantial portfolio of buildings, and there is also the potential for such studies to be tied to the availability of any future grants. Finally, I would like to see more benchmarks of energy use, making it increasingly possible to accurately evaluate how your building is performing in various aspects in relation to similar buildings, and enabling recognition for those buildings that do perform well. CIBSE will be updating our own benchmarks on CIBSE Guide F. We will also be publishing shortly the results of a 3-year EU-funded project, ISERV, in which CIBSE has been a partner. The project formally ends today and has studied energy consumption in a wide range of buildings across Europe. So this also helps to contribute to my first aim of growing CIBSE'S influence worldwide. Some of you may not fully appreciate just how CIBSE is perceived as a global institution around the world. We are a family. If a CIBSE member from, say, the UK, so say one of you find yourselves in Australia, you only need to make contact with a local chapter to be introduced to a huge group of like-minded professionals, and they can assist you in a range of issues, including advice on local codes and standards. And if, for example, someone wants to know more about a skyscraper in Hong Kong, the chances are that it was a CIBSE member that was involved. And direct contact with that person might be only a couple of phone calls away. We have the power of numbers and the global spread in our professional institution. This is our era to make a real difference in this world through our expertise, experience and networks to help deliver a built environment that meets the challenges of the years to come. Amongst the uncertainties of the future, our profession can only grow in stature and relevance. These are exciting times, and we need to project this fact, not only to our potential customers, stakeholders and the general public, but also to those considering a career in building services. We work in a truly dynamic environment in which we physically get to see the fruits of our labour. We are not tethered to the one project indefinitely, and we cooperate with a moving parade of great professionals. We need to get this message of diversity out to those considering a career in building services. This is a great time for people who want to make a difference to get involved in our industry. In closing, I would like to take this opportunity to give thanks to some of the people that get little recognition for their efforts. There is a large core of our membership that is passionate about providing better building services, better building performance, and a better future for coming generations. Many of them are involved in voluntary roles, either as presenters, organisers, or on committees throughout our regions. It is their enthusiasm that is invaluable. It is their knowledge that is invaluable, and it is their passion that is invaluable. They show us every day that together with CIBSE we have an important role to play, and we can achieve major improvements in this fragile world of ours. Honoured guests, ladies and gentlemen, as I said at the opening of this presentation, there has never been a better time to be a building services engineer. Thank you.
President, ladies and gentlemen, an international president is a great opportunity for the Institute and its members and indicates a progressive way forward for us all. With a shrinking world through new technologies and a world that is seeing an ever-growing environment and its issues, it is important that the Institute works on a global basis. Many of the challenges that Peter has mentioned in his speech are common throughout the built environment, regardless of country or continent. Issues on technology and smarter buildings, growing population, BIM, legislation and sustainability are all topics we hear about in the UK every day. Avoiding greenwash is exactly the point that we need to review and the product market and BREEAM assessments carefully so that we ensure we meet the demands of the internal comfort and energy efficiency in terms of systems are not part of one. Peter mentioned that in order to address sustainability in the social dimension, we must attract a wider and more diverse range of people into our global and professional institutional family and continue to support our young engineers as they develop as the next generation of CIBSE leaders. He also talked about the fact that the industry relies on engineers to produce a true and fair view of all aspects of engineering. With a strong institute staff structure, the board and collaborative support from industry and education, we can achieve these requirements. Peter went on to discuss the changing times with a view of change of influence of architects and builders and the more involvement of the FM team, the use of PPP and PFI and infrastructure projects, and the more use of off-site manufacturing are all relevant to what we see today. We must embrace the greater level of structure within these projects and be more open and truthful, and it's interesting to see that the Australian elephant in the room is as big as that in the UK. I'm sure you agree with Peter, as the new president, the Institute can involve a greater audience in addressing these global issues as a family of like-minded individuals. I ask you therefore to join me in thanking Peter for his address.
Thank you for those words, Nick, and thank you, Peter, for an excellent presentation. I think that simply says that is the finish of our AGM for this year. Thank you all for coming, for participating in your support to us all, and let's look forward to a really superb year coming forward for CIBSE with an international influence like we've never had before. So thank you all for coming.